Hello, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Mitchell Ringos. 4 First Nations from here in the Northwest are sending a message to government and industry: no development without free, prior, and informed consent. Leadership from the 4 communities met in Grassy Narrows this week, committing to mutual aid and support of each community's defense of their traditional territories against what they believe are incursions from the province. Lee Noonan was there.
Nishnawbe has now joined the First Nations of Grassy Narrows, KI, and Wapakika, forming the Land Defense Alliance and pledging to cooperate in the protection of their lands and waters. They're calling for a meeting with the Premier and an end to free entry staking. Nishnawbe is bracing for conflict over the Ring of Fire and the Northern Road Link. Chief Wayne Munoz says they will fight any development that affects their territory or the Attawapiskat River without the endorsement of his people.
Our river system will matter, and we will defend our rights on the river system, and we will certainly not sit idle with these developments as Ontario is planning to make progress on these on the promises that they made from their last election campaign. So certainly the bulldozer analogy that Premier Ford made to the public or during his election and reaffirmed just recently definitely doesn't sit well with our First Nation.
For KI and Wapakika, protecting the Fawn River watershed is the priority. In 2012, the province declared 23,000 kilometers of their land protected from mining, but now the 2 communities want to see that extended throughout their territories.
We have laws, we have policies, and these are the things that government and other companies, we want them to acknowledge moving forward in the future. Come to us first. Government doesn't have to okay it. It's you got to get our consent, the communities. If you don't, then be a long, hard struggle, a battle.
Grassy Narrows Chief Rudy Turtle says it was the heavy impact of resource extraction that brought the communities together.
We agreed that we would be helping one another because we have to. We're basically forced to get together and send a clear message to the governments that, you know, the First Nations people don't want these encroachments in our land.
The NDP's Saul Mamakwa, who represents the 4 communities as the MPP for Kiiwetinoong, says he stands by the communities.
It's so important for, to protect these lands because their ways of life, identity, language comes from the land. And I think that's what they're trying to protect for generations to come.
The First Nations intend to continue their cooperation with a meeting planned in the spring or summer in Nishnawbe. But first, all 4 leaders will be heading to Queen's Park at the end of March to bring their message directly to the Premier. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
1 person has died in a 2-vehicle crash on Highway 17 near the Steel River Bridge between Terrace Bay and Marathon last Saturday morning. OPP confirmed that a transport and an SUV collided. A 64-year-old occupant in the SUV was killed. Another person was taken to hospital with minor injuries. The highway was closed for most of the day Saturday while OPP investigated. A grim anniversary this week, and Kandeguff First Nation marked 28 years without clean tap water. It's the longest-standing boil water advisory in the country. The advisory was first declared on February 1st, 1995, and when the water plant had problems in 2019 and 2020, the entire community was evacuated twice. Chief Wayne Munoz says the lack of clean water on the Fly-In First Nation has taken a serious toll on his community members, many of whom have lived their whole lives without potable tap water.
We say we live in the greatest country in this world. How Canada is one of the greatest countries, one of the most richest countries in the world, and yet a First Nation in Northern Ontario is not able to access clean, safe drinking water in their homes. And that should tell Canada something. That should tell the public something. Why is that still happening today? And it's not a celebratory moment. It's actually a shameful thing to think about and to even share that we are still talking about this after 28 years.
An upgrade to the community's water treatment plant was commissioned in 2020, and according to Indigenous Services Canada, the work is approaching final completion. 15 of the 33 long-term boil water advisories remaining in Canada are in northwestern Ontario. It'll be at least another 4 weeks until evacuees from Wapsamong are able to go home. That's how long it's expected to take to set up a temporary water line bypass system. It will give the community running water, but the boil water advisory will continue for much longer. Wapsamong leaders are working together with multiple partners to repair damage to their water treatment system. Around 350 community members were evacuated to Kenora and later to Winnipeg just before the holidays. Sioux Lookout's mayor is maintaining his cautious optimism after meeting with the Solicitor General about their sky-high policing cost at this year's Roma conference. Municipalities of Sioux Lookout, Kenora, and Pickle Lake formed a coalition last year to collectively discuss reducing policing costs, claiming the three communities pay almost triple what other communities policed by the OPP are paying. Sioux Lookout Mayor Doug Lawrence says the meeting with Solicitor General Michael Kersner at Roma went well. However, no concrete solution was decided by the end of the day. Lawrence says all parties agreed to continue talking over the coming weeks.
And we have proposed various things, but it's up to them to come back with a proposal from the Solicitor General's office. So that's what I hope they're working on. I believe they are. That's over the coming weeks. He seems to be fully committed, fully engaged, and committed to working with us and getting back and working with his staff and getting back to us within a matter of weeks for further discussion. So I think that's a very positive signal.
Lawrence hopes they'll be able to find a temporary solution first, and then over the longer term, the ministry will work through the process of renewing the Community Policing Safety Act. Meanwhile, Dryden City Council has approved a pair of funding agreements with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which will see the community receive more than $3 million over the next 2 years. Chief Administrative Officer Roger Nesbitt recently spoke about the terms of the deal at a Dryden Council meeting.
That acceptance of the given funding does not constitute the municipality's community support for the APM project, nor the selection of the Township of Ignace as a final host community.
As a significant neighboring community, Dryden will receive $1.25 million in funding to continue to learn more about the potential nuclear waste repository near Ignace. Nesbitt says it takes a lot of resources to stay engaged in the process, both internally and externally, and keep Dryden residents informed. Dryden will receive another $2 million in near-term investment funding. That money is to be used to demonstrate the community at large whether the project will be beneficial for Dryden.
We've leveraged the Learn More funding program now for approximately $2.4 million since about 2014. So it really has helped the community stay engaged, with this project, learn about the project. It's helped us develop, more community capacity and really develop some strategic planning moving forward. Whether this project does happen in our area or not, the benefits of this funding will be long-lasting.
The NWMO plans to select a site for the nuclear waste repository in 2024. Shock and outrage were expressed at a recent neighborhood meeting in Kaministiquia regarding Hydro One's preferred route for the Wasingan transmission line. The new high-voltage line between Thunder Bay, Atikokan, and Dryden is moving forward in the planning phase, and many rural residents are fearing they may be displaced from their homes. Kurt Black reports.
And we're going to be a member of the community, just like any other, any other building or business. We want to be a good neighbor.
That comment last week from Hydro One's Daniel Leviton is in stark contrast to the stories that were shared Wednesday night at the Kaministiquia Community Center, as over 50 area residents came together to voice their displeasure with the proposed Wasingan transmission line project.
The picture that we received shows the line going directly through the foundation of my brand new house. That was our retirement plan.
We're not going to let them take our land, our property, our home away from us.
The line through our property has made it so we have no choice if this project goes ahead. We are going to have to relocate.
Ian Pisey is just one of a number of residents who will be forced to move if the project goes ahead as planned, as the proposed route will go right through the home he and his wife had planned on spending their retirement in.
I think they need to be aware of the human cost of somebody sitting in front of a computer in 905 or 519 and drawing a line on a map. And I think by having this session tonight, we're going to collect that information from these people to show what that human cost is.
The meeting's organizer, Michelle Hammer, whose 100-year-old family homestead also falls on the preferred route, was shocked by just how many families had until recently been left in the dark by Hydro One.
We were not properly disclosed to. A lot of people didn't even know until they looked online and they saw a line running through their house and their barn. So that's not acceptable.
Amongst all the emotion Wednesday night, former lawyer David Airyu was on hand to share his expertise in dealing with large corporations and believes as long as the community remains a united front, they'll have a fighting chance at protecting their land.
People are so aggravated, they got together and vented tonight. There was a lot of emotion going off. And once that gets sifted off, then it's my job to make the recommendations as to strategy. So it's a good beginning. It's as good as you could get. I mean, the horror stories, you couldn't ask for better ones.
Hammer says the group will continue to meet until another route through their community can be found, and says residents wanting to learn more can reach out through the Neighbors on the Line Facebook page. In response to the complaints, Hydro One issued a statement saying the utility remains committed to ongoing, meaningful, and open engagement with residents and communities. Kurt Black, TBT News.
Coming up after the break, a proposal that could mean hundreds of kilometers of new hiking and skiing trails in the region. Welcome back. The region could soon be getting a new non-motorized trail network. The Northwestern Ontario Recreational Trails Association is a non-profit group that was formed in 2021. They've developed a 5-year, 5-phase trail plan that will allow for more hiking, cross-country skiing, and other activities across hundreds of kilometers between Nipigon and Atikokan. Mike Lang reports.
Shortly before I retired, I made it my goal to hike the entire Superior Hiking Trail in northern Minnesota. I got about halfway done, COVID hit, the border shut, and I'm sitting here, okay, I got all this idle time now, what do we do? And I started thinking, well, why don't we have something similar to what the Superior Hiking Trail has?
That is what inspired Len Day to help establish Nuarta, a nonprofit volunteer organization whose goal is to expand the existing Trans-Canada Trail network in the Northwest by branching unconnected ends of it together. The group is now one step closer to achieving that goal after releasing their plans to add over 400 kilometers of new land trails for hiking, biking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and eventually horseback riding and dog sledding where permissible.
There's a lot of interest and need for people to get outdoors, to get away from the hubbub of the city and noise and that sort of things, and give them, a reconnect to nature and that. So that's something that's desperately needed here, and we're hoping to be able to provide that.
Phase 1 of the 5-year, 5-phase plan is a 60-kilometer connection from Kakabeka Falls to Chappaqua. Phase 2 is to connect Thunder Bay to Kakabeka by extending the already existing 40-kilometer City of Thunder Bay Trail at Fort William Historical Park. Phase 3 is an 80-kilometer connection from Kakabeka to the U.S. border by joining the existing Path of the Paddle Trail at Pigeon River. Phase 4 is to head north with a 120-kilometer trail from Thunder Bay to Nipigon, and Phase 5 is to join Chappaqua to Atikokan with a 140-kilometer trail. These trails will be for non-motorized activity only, which could lead to conflicts with those who enjoy ATVing and snowmobiling. But Day says their plan is to promote nature, physical activity, and safety.
And mixing motorized with non-motorized never usually works out well. And the other issue with that is once you introduce motorized and non-motorized, then the liability onus goes up exponentially, and as does the cost to provide that liability coverage.
Requests for the approval of most of the Phase 1 Chappaqua Trail have already been submitted to the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, and that section is expected to be completed by this fall. The other phases are planned for 2024 and 2025. Mike Lang, TBT News.
Northern Ontario has seen some of the most dire shortages of trained hospital staff since the onset of the pandemic. Seven Generations Educational Institute CEO Brent Tukane is confident a recently announced expansion of the province's Learn and Stay program could help the situation in a number of underserved communities.
When we look at Northwestern Ontario, some of our smaller towns and hospitals and that, the challenges with, emergency room staff and things like that, we're really hoping that this will be another plus to keep people here and lessen the burden on the existing staff. I think that's, if we can lessen that burden, people will, most likely stay in the profession too.
The grant program, which was first announced in March of 2022 for students who enroll in nursing programs, will now include paramedic and medical laboratory technologist programs in priority communities. Eligible students would receive full upfront funding for tuition, books, and other direct educational costs in return for working and caring for people in the region where they studied for a term of service after they graduate. Grant applications for the 2023-24 academic year open this spring. The Ontario Medical Association is calling on the province to include a number of healthcare measures in the 2023 budget, which they say would improve health outcomes in the Northwest. At a pre-budget consultation meeting held in Sault Ste. Marie on Tuesday, OMA Chair for the Northwest District, Dr. Stephen Viharioki, outlined a number of measures he says would address urgent issues in the healthcare system throughout the province, and particularly in the Northwest. He wants to see more foreign-trained doctors licensed through a practice-ready assessment program, coupled with a mentorship program designed to keep a physician in the North. Centralized waitlists for surgeries and procedures in each region to increase access and transparency, and provide diagnostic equipment and services inside long-term care homes to reduce the burden on hospitals.
And procedures that would have taken place during the pandemic did not, causing wait times for many diagnostic procedures and surgeries, which were already too long before the pandemic and tended to exceed provincial guidelines. As a result, patients who would have been diagnosed and treated sooner are presenting to us later and sicker.
Biharioki, who is also Chief of Emergency Services at the Dryden Regional Health Center, says he appreciates investments made in the last provincial budget, including the new cardiovascular surgery program in Thunder Bay, but he says the urgency of the situation demands more aggressive action. 5 years after the Broken Trust report called for the establishment of a forensic pathology unit in Thunder Bay to conduct medio-legal autopsies in the region, the recommendation remains unfulfilled, and now the Thunder Bay Regional Health Sciences Center has confirmed that it will stop performing any forensic autopsies in June. The announcement means that all post-mortems involving potentially suspicious deaths will have to be conducted in Toronto. Hospital officials say having their lab perform forensic autopsies has put tremendous pressure on staff capacity and resources at a time when the healthcare system is already overloaded. In 2021, nearly half of the forensic postmortems were done locally, but as the number of potentially suspicious deaths rose in 2022, nearly 2/3 of those cases were transported to the Provincial Forensic Pathology Unit in Toronto. The regional hospital recently advised the coroner's office and the Solicitor General to find alternatives by June of 2023. Ministry officials confirm they are aware of the hospital's withdrawal of the service and say they'll continue to adhere to strict timelines while performing those autopsies in Toronto. The hospital's pathology department will continue to do medical autopsies when requested by their clinical staff. Up next, we'll have a story from Thunder Bay, where organizers are bringing Anishinaabe activities to local youth and families. A series of one-day language camps were held at Fort William Historical Park last week. It was a chance for youth and families in Thunder Bay to embrace Anishinaabe through a variety of activities. Jessica Clement was there.
The Thunder Bay Indigenous Friendship Center invited students, families, and interested participants to Fort William Historical Park this week to take part in language camps. Attendees from various age groups were able to participate in a number of hands-on cultural and educational activities like moose hide tanning, crafting, snowshoeing, and language classes. The Indigenous Friendship Center's Genevieve Desmoulins says she wants to help traditional languages make a comeback.
I learn differently than just from reading a textbook or reading words. And I feel like when it comes to language, it's really important to have the language heard. And I thought, but how can I bring that into the community where I can get everyone together and have more people hearing the language and partaking in our culture as well?
Desmoulins hopes the program resonates with people and makes them want to learn more about Anishinaabe-Moan language and culture.
There's a lot of people who have lost the ability to speak it. Some of us weren't raised with that language at all. Like for myself, I didn't even know that my grandmother was a language speaker until I was an adult.
Many of the parents had similar experiences and want it to be different for their kids.
Growing up, the language wasn't a part of our home, so that's something I hope to instill in our home and with my young daughters.
You know, a lot of our language was lost throughout the generations, and so now them learning it and them taking the day off school and coming here and learning their culture is really important to me.
More information about the Indigenous Friendship Center's programs can be found on their website and social media pages. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
An OG Cree singer-songwriter from the Northwest has been nominated for a Juno Award. Ace released his debut album last year, along with the hit single Nomads.
Now I'm here, or just
The 30-year-old musician is a member of the Sandy Lake First Nation and was raised in Kaministiquia, just west of Thunder Bay. He moved to Southern Ontario to study journalism and also continued to pursue a musical career, singing with an Indigenous-owned record label in 2021. The nominees for this year's Juno Awards were released on Tuesday, and Ace is one of 5 artists vying for Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year. The Junos will be handed out in Edmonton on March 13th, and Ace will also be performing during the live broadcast. And that wraps up this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.